story, but first we are going to read the Bible, and then we are going to be doing the Psalms, and then we are going to be reading the Hittite Warrior. I'm going to try to make a like and subscribe to the video. I'm not going to show you that because that's our next book. Okay, here's my dad for Bible time.
Hello! We're on Ecclesiastes chapter 11. This is the English Standard Version. Let me begin. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8. For you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart, and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. And there's that word that Kimberly noticed wasn't in chapter 10. So, now we are in the last chapter. Let's see. I can't remember the name of the guy. Uriah was in a door, and he met a man. The man's name was... That's who I don't remember his name. Anyway, so he helped Uriah and Moses, but he was kind of suspicious, and so not that he was suspicious, but he was suspicious. Like he was like a really creepy guy, and so anyway, it wound up that he killed Uriah and Moses and buried them in his backyard. And that is the end of the story. Here's Kimberly to say how it really happened.
Why always with killing? I love it.
You know.
That's what warriors do.
Okay, so what actually happened was the guy in door, he managed to get them on a boat. And the person at the boat was like, oh, yeah, I'll get you to Tyre if you pay your share. And he didn't actually do that. He just said, yeah, I'll get him to Tyre. And
Elhanan was his name.
And it turns out he was actually Jotham's uncle. And Uriah, I remember the name. Uriah kind of caught up on that during their trip. And once they got there, he's like, you know, how about this? You pay me 30 silver, or you want to know what I'll say? You guys get to be my slaves because you can't pay. So, Uriah goes over to, not Hannibal, because he died. It was his Hannibal's father, I think. And he said, "Okay, I'll pay for
Athbal."
Yeah, Athbal. Athbal said, "I'll pay for this one. I'll pay for Uriah." And Moses, who he did not know, was gonna be a slave. But then Uriah was like, "Okay, I know who you are, and I am just going to go parade over to the Hebrews and say I know exactly where you are, and they will they will riot or whatever. They'll get you in big trouble. And so, long story short, he managed to convince him to let Moses free at the price of 60,000 to Uriah.
60,000?
Silver piece. No, it's 60.
60 shekels.
Where did I get 1,000? I keep thinking it's 1,000. 60 silver pieces. That's what it was. And I think he even kept the original 30. So, yay! I'm going to hand it off to Dad, who's going to read us a story.
Okay, and 60 shekels is actually quite a bit of money. We just, kind of say it. But if you think about it, we're talking about a weighted measurement of silver. That's quite a bit of money. Silver is kind of valuable. Like an ounce of silver today is probably, $20, $25. And so 60 shekels, I don't know how much a shekel weighs, but you can imagine it's quite a bit. All right, so 23, the new masters. There were Philistine soldiers in the streets of Tyre. They wore helmets crowned with plumes. The streets were quiet, and though the sun was shining, it was as if a shadow hung over the city. Athbal was dead. Reuel had told me. He had died on the day that Tyre had opened her gates to the Philistines and had never heard the news I brought. The news of the death of Hannibal. For this I was glad. If Athbal is dead, I asked Reuel, who is it who paid my ransom? Reuel hesitated, looking scared. It was the mistress, he said at last, the Lady Maris, but you must not tell him that. There was time to say no more, for we had come to the House of Athbal, the bright, shining, three-storied house that had taken my breath away when I had first seen it. It was like coming home, and I pushed my way through the great door and hastened to the common room, not stopping to have my hands and feet bathed. Moses followed more slowly. The common room was empty. Where is everybody? I asked. Then, more soberly, I added, where is the Lady Maris and the Lady Mehitabel? And why are the servants so quiet? For I had heard no laughter and not even a single voice. The ladies do not come to the common room now, said Reuel, and the servants have no heart for gossiping. Besides, they are afraid. Afraid? But Reuel did not seem to want to say any more. I will bring you some bread and cheese, he said, and he added, muttering to himself, even he would not have the face to starve a guest in the house. He left the room, but was back soon in the company of the little servant girl that I remembered so well, the one who played the flute. They brought a sumptuous midday meal of cheeses and greens and cakes of goat's milk. It seemed so natural and comforting to me to be served and hovered over again in the house of Athbal that I began to forget the strangeness and the silence. Eat, Moses, I said happily. We are home and our troubles are over. But, though Moses smiled and ate, his eyes were sober and watchful. Our meal was interrupted by the sound of a loud barking and snuffling outside in the courtyard. We heard the noise of scurrying feet as someone hastened to throw open the door, and a moment later 2 men walked into the common room. One of them was Akil the Philistine. He was changed. He was dressed like a prince, his bronze hair sleek and curled on his shoulders, a patterned kilt of finest linen belted about his waist, fitted boots of the softest and thinnest leather upon his feet, and precious ornaments upon his breast and arms, and he walked like the master of the house. He stopped in surprise at seeing us there. Then he came toward us, the dog Pelops at his heels, a little smile on his face. I rose to face him, and when he saw my face, the smile faded. The little servant girl had come in to remove the dishes. She stopped still in fear upon seeing who was there. Akil's eyes flickered over the table, then flashed an ugly look at the girl. You have been generous in my absence and without my leave, he said to her. Suddenly he raised his walking stick and swept the dishes from the low table onto the floor. The girl turned pale. My lord, she quavered, it was not my doing. The second man stepped forward and spoke in a soft, mincing voice. "What will it take to teach you," he said, "to be silent till you are told to speak?" The girl began to cry. I stared at him. I remembered who he was, the slave Akil had given to the chief of Tyre. The slave that Jotham had said was not a slave but a spy. I turned to Akil in anger. "Who is he," I said, "to speak in that manner to a servant in the house of Athbal? And who are you to come in like the master of the house, bringing your dog?" "Who do you think is the master here, Uriah Tarhund?" said Akil. "Athbal is dead, and Hannibal too," I replied. "The master here is their nearest of kin, the nearest kin of the lady Mehitabel and the lady Maris." "You have said it, Uriah Tarhund," replied Akil, nodding gravely. "Therefore I am the master here, for soon I will be their nearest of kin." It came to me slowly. "You are to marry Mehitabel?" I muttered, not believing it, and then in anger I cried, "Who has given her to you?" The slave, who was not a slave, spoke again in his peculiar lisping accent. "Lower your voice, barbarian. We Philistines are masters now in Tyre. We have only to take what we want. We need no permission from Canaanites." I looked him up and down. There was a mean triumph in his eyes. He was a slim, small man, darkly handsome, and carried himself straighter and prouder than any lord I had ever seen. He was surely of the ancient blood of the western islands, unmixed with the blood of the fair-haired northerners, a true heir of that great people. The northerners had conquered him, but now they had made him a conqueror again, and all the bitterness of the past was in his heart to make him vengeful and cruel. "Deucalion is right," said Akil. "Still, I am not a savage. I am a man of Crete, and there were ancestors of my mother who even served under Minos. I would marry no woman against her will or the will of her family. The lady Maris has given her to me." "I don't believe it," I told him. Akil nodded. "I see that you have hardened your heart against me, Uriah. You have learned the lesson of the Hittites badly. The lessons you will learn in Tyre will be more thorough, so I will give you some advice. Be out of this house, you and your friend, by tonight, when I return." Hearing the menace in his master's voice, the dog Pelops bared his teeth and growled softly. Akil took him by the collar and jerked him around. The three of them left the room, and we heard the outer door open and swing shut. I stood in the center of the common room, staring at the broken dishes on the floor. I looked at Moses. His face was very still. Suddenly, I clapped my hands hard. "Raoul!" I shouted. "I will bring him," said the little servant girl, who had stood trembling through it all. "No, you can do it yourself," I said. "Go to the Lady Maris and tell her that I am here. Ask her if I may come to her rooms." Chapter 24, The True King. The Lady Maris sat alone in her parlor. She had not changed much since I had gone away, but her eyes were dim, and she no longer sat straight and proud in her chair. I bowed before her and pressed her hands to my lips. Moses stood in the shadows by the entrance. "Good Mother Maris," I said, "I have brought you sad news." "My grandson," she said. "I knew when he left that he would not come back." She closed her eyes and swayed back and forward. I thought she had forgotten I was there. "Mother Maris," I said, "you have another grandchild." "Out of all my children, only one grandchild left." "You have another grandchild," I repeated, "one who has no one to turn to but you." "Mehitabel," said the Lady Maris, "but she is not mine now. I have given her away. She will be safe." "You have given her to the evil one," I cried. "Do you know what the Philistines are doing in Canaan? What they will do in Egypt, the land of your birth? Do you know what they are doing here in this house?" The Lady Maris looked at me with puzzled eyes. Moses came to me and touched my arm. "Do not torment her," he said. "What can she do?" At the strange voice, the Lady Maris looked up vaguely. "Who is this you have brought here?" she asked. She asked me, a little of her old pride in her voice, offended at seeing a stranger in her rooms. "A true friend," I replied. "A man of your own birthland. He is called Moses." Some of the dimness seemed to have gone from her eyes. She leaned forward to see him closer. "I have seen him before," she said. No, Mother Maris. He has never been in Tyre, and he was born long after you left Egypt." To my amazement, I saw that she had begun to tremble. "But I have seen him before," she cried. I was frightened, for her very lips had begun to tremble, and her eyes had become enormous in her thin old face. I turned to Moses. "Tell her," I urged him. "Tell her she could never have seen you before." Then I stopped, amazed at the look on Moses' face. He seemed to be trying to make up his mind whether or not to speak. "It may be," he said at last, "that she has seen pictures, or images of my family." With all my troubles, I was almost ready to laugh. "Your family," I said impatiently. "A charity schoolboy does not have pictures or images of his family." Moses turned on me. I had never thought he could be angry, but now the fire of a great wrath burned in his eyes, and I started back. "My family is the family of the last true kings of Egypt," he cried. "I am Pharaoh." A moment after, he lowered his eyes and flushed a little, and truly it was laughable for a penniless boy, an Egyptian mercenary in the outposts of Canaan, to suddenly cry out that he was Pharaoh of Egypt. But I did not laugh. I only said somewhat feebly, "I don't understand." Moses raised his head and spoke with quiet pride. "Smenkhare himself, older brother of Tutankhamun, husband of Meritaten, oldest daughter of the true Pharaoh, was my ancestor. I am the oldest son of all the oldest sons of that line. If the world were as it should be, I would be Pharaoh of Egypt." I looked closely at his face that I had always seemed to have seen before. Now I knew where it was I had seen it, in the little statue head of Nefertiti, the beautiful lady, which now lay by the hand of the Lady Maris. He was not beautiful, but he had the same delicate face and stubborn jaw. For a while the room was very still, and through my mind ran the stories I had heard of the ancient legendary kings of Egypt, of the conquerors of Canaan, the builders of great cities, the accursed city of Akhenaten. They were gathered together in this boy who fought beside me, laying on the ground at my side, and saved my life in the river. "But why," I said at last, "are you not living as a great lord in Egypt?" Moses smiled. "The men and women of my family live as peasants and exiles," he said. "Smenkhare and Meritaten were murdered by the priests of the god Ammon, but their child was hidden away, and Horemheb's men never discovered it where. Only to that child's descendants was the story told, and we never tell it outside the family. I have told the story to no one but you." The Lady Maris was watching him with eyes that were no longer vague. "The true king," she said. "Long ago I prayed to Aten that I might see the true king before I died. He has answered my prayer. It is a sign to me. I will commit no act of shame before him." She turned commandingly to the little flute player. "Bring my granddaughter to me," she said. Mehetabel came, and my jaw dropped at the sight of her, for she was dressed as I had never seen a woman dressed before, in a gown belted in jewels, and her waist drawn in small as my hand. A golden skirt of many tiers swept the floor behind her, and I knew I was seeing a gown of the Cretan women, such a gown as they had worn to watch the bull dancing, or in the great court of the House of the Double Axe. But it was her face that stopped me short. It was as still and pale as Hannibal the night before he died. She did not look at me, but stood at the door, stiff and still as a doll in her foreign gown, and I stepped back and did not try to greet her. I have a command to give you," said her grandmother. You have already given it, said Mehetabel gently. I have told you that I will obey. This is a different command, said the grandmother quietly, and I saw Mehetabel frown in surprise at the change that had come over the old woman. When I told you I would give you to Akil, said the Lady Maris, you said you would obey me, but I knew it was not I whom you were obeying. Mehetabel flushed suddenly and bowed her head. It was because Akil is strong, said the old lady, and we are weak. And you thought you had no choice, but now I have another command for you, and you will obey it, because I, the mother of your father, have given it. She had risen from her chair with the aid of a stick, and now she brought the stick down hard on the floor. I forbid you to marry Akil, she said. Mehetabel raised her head. You are right, she said. I was not obeying you. I was obeying our new masters, and they are still our masters, and they are still the ones I must obey, as Tyre has obeyed them. Like the city, I have no choice. As if she had not heard her, the grandmother said, Since you will now be in great danger in this house, I have another command. You will leave it, and you will leave the city tonight before Akil returns. Mehetabel's mouth fell open. She had turned pale again, but her eyes had come to life. What are you saying? She cried. The grandmother's voice trembled. It is a hard thing I am telling you to do, perhaps a terrible thing, but the other is worse, and there is always a choice. She looked at Moses. I have had a sign that has given me the strength to make it. Moses did not look much like a pharaoh at that moment, and I could see he was not feeling like one either. But I gave him a warning look. He was the sign that would save Mehetabel, and it was up to him to be worthy of it. Where can I go? Said Mehetabel at last. Her eyes were frightened, but I saw that she too had made her choice. I spoke to her for the first time. Do you remember the story of the princes and the Hittite prince? I asked her. Do you remember what you said? Mehetabel looked at me with tears in her eyes. That if I had been the princes and Jotham the Hittite prince, but Jotham is surely dead. He offended against Moloch. What if he is not? I asked her. What if his God is more powerful than Moloch and has protected him? You see that I am still alive. I cannot be sure about Jotham, but if he were alive and heard about the Philistines in Tyre, he might come here to find you, and then he would surely die, unless you went to him first. Where would he be? She asked me. In Harosheth, I answered, and that is where I must go to keep a promise. Take her with you, said the grandmother. You are as a grandson, and she is as your sister. And you, to Mehetabel, go to your room and take off that devil's dress. Suddenly Mehetabel began to laugh. She seized the old woman in her arms and covered her face with kisses. Then she ran from the room, the golden flounces clinking and rustling. The Lady Maris sank back into her chair. Moses and I hastened to help her. It is a hard thing I have done, she whispered. I will take care of her, I promised. I will be as her brother. And I am not such a fool as I was when I left Tyre. The ransom you sent for me this morning, look, I have brought it back to you twice over. And I showed her the bag with the silver shekels. Keep it, said the old lady. With my granddaughter in your charge, you will have earned it 3 times over before you are done. It is all I can give you for her, for Akil has taken our property. Come with us, Mother Maris, I said, in sudden fear for her safety, but she shook her head. I am too old. I would be dead before you had me out of the city. I do not fear Akil, now that Aten has given me his sign. She raised her hand and beckoned to Moses. My king, my young king without a country, I have a tribute for you, the best I have to give. She raised the little image of Queen Nefertiti in her hands. She was the mother of your line. I prayed that one day I might give her into the hands of the true king. She was the most beautiful of women, and one day when she was old, she gave this to a woman of my family. She fell silent, lost in dreams, and though Moses gave me the image to hold and bent to kiss her hands, I do not think she knew when we left the room. Chapter 25 is called Pelops, and we're going to read that one, and then that will be all. Chapter 25, Pelops. The sun was low when we were ready to leave. Mehetabel had made many preparations and gathered together many belongings. And when I saw what she had, I told her she must leave them. "But my jewels," she cried, "are people to take me for a slave? Besides, many of them are sacred. And how can I leave my household images? And what am I to do without my curling pins? And no one will know me without the paints for my mouth and eyes." "Jotham will know you, if he still lives," I replied firmly. "Do you want to draw down robbers? Besides, who do you think will carry them for you?" "My porters," said Mehetabel grandly. So I explained to her, as patiently as I could, that she could bring only one woman servant with her, and that we would have a hard time feeding that one, and that we had better save our strength for walking, not for carrying heavy bundles. Mehetabel listened, frowning, but she was the daughter of Athbal and could always understand good sense. She chose the little flute player to take along with her, and Akil, having sold away the old nurse whom she had loved. The flute player wept for joy, being in such fear of Akil and his man, the Cretan Deucalion. At last we were ready. The sun was down, and we were in a fever to be out of the house before Akil returned. And yet Mehetabel lingered in the hallway, looking about at the bright hangings and rich rugs, the dainty ornaments and colored tiles, with eyes full of tears. "Come," I said to her, and I said as my father had once said to me, "It is not your home, it is their home now." At last we were in the street, and there suddenly Mehetabel stopped. "Zebub," she cried. She had turned very pale. I had forgotten him. Zebub was the Egyptian fox dog. She turned, and I saw that she was ready to go back into the house. "It is too late," I hissed at her. "Any minute now Akil will come around the corner with Deucalion, and then what?" Mehetabel faced me, white and stubborn. "Akil will kill him," she said. "He will drown him or set Pelops upon him. If you want to go without me, go, but I am going back for Zebub." I could not let her go back. I had promised Hannibal and the Lady Maris. "Wait here," I said. "Moses, keep Mehetabel out of sight." And to Mehetabel I added bitterly, "And if I am slain in the house of your father, it will be on your head." "You will find him on the roof in the summer parlor," was all Mehetabel replied. I moved as fast as I dared, yet silently too. For all I knew, Akil might already have come into the house, but I saw no one in the entryway or on the stairs, and I ran up them, leaping two at a time, so that I was breathless when I came to the roof. Zebub, as Mehetabel had said, was in the summer parlor, snoring on a cushion. I seized him. He did not like to be wakened so rudely, and tried to bite me. I stuffed him under one arm and hastened out onto the open roof and toward the stairs. "Barbarian!" shouted a voice behind me. I whirled to face Akil, backed by his man Deucalion. They had been in the house after all, and had followed me up the stairs. I dropped the little dog and waited for what would come. The two men came toward me. "You did not listen to me. You came back," said Akil. "You came back to steal. A thief in the night may be slain with no questions asked. Deucalion!" Moving faster than a snake, the Cretan got behind me and seized my arms. I stood as my father had once stood, pinned and helpless, and the blue-eyed man came toward me, balancing his stick in both hands. But I was not my father. I was young and strong and well-fed, and unlike him, I did not want to die. Besides this, I had learned things in my training outside of Harosheth. And suddenly I bent and twisted, and the Cretan was no longer holding my arms, but was lying flat on the roof. He had cracked his head on the stone. Whether or not he was dead, I did not know, but surely he would not hurt or frighten people for a long time to come. Akil stood still a moment in amazement, and this gave me my chance to spring upon him and get hold of the stick. We wrestled for it close together. I saw only his eyes, blazing blue eyes, the eyes of a man, the man who had slain my father. Suddenly, the stick flew from our hands, clattering along toward the edge of the roof. I reeled from the surprise. Akil was still stronger than I. Before I could find my balance, he had borne me down on the stones. His hands were around my neck, his fingers digging into my throat. There were red waves in the air before me. My head and my neck and my chest were bursting, but I could still see those blue eyes. I went for them with my thumbs over the roaring in my ears. I heard him yell. The fingers loosened and grabbed my wrists, and the air, with great pain, rushed back into my chest. I rolled and twisted to get free of him, using my knees and feet. He fell away from me for a moment, and I struggled up, holding on to the parapet at the edge of the roof. In an instant, he too was on his feet, coming upon me again. With a sickening fear, I knew what he would do, that he would force me over the edge. I staggered away from the parapet. He sprang after me, and in that instant a brown body hurtled through the air, just missing me, and landing instead full upon the shoulders of Akil. I saw the Philistine reel and heard him scream, and then I saw him topple crazily over the edge and into the courtyard below. The dog Pelops stood, his forefeet resting on the parapet, and after a moment he began to howl. Akil's shout had brought him. It was I he had meant to spring upon. For a moment I watched him in a kind of horror. Then stepping over to Deucalion, who was breathing with a rasping sound, I gathered up Zebub, who had watched it all with great interest, yapping with excitement. I tucked him again under my arm, and gasping the air back into me, ran down the stairs and into the street. Moses and Mehetabel and the flute player were waiting around the corner. Mehetabel's eyes widened when she saw me, but I thrust the fox dog into her arms, and it was a long time before I would speak to her again after all she had put me through. Akil is dead, said Moses. He seemed to know things without being told. I nodded. It was still hard for me to breathe. We must not be out of the city before they find him. Or we must be out of the city before they find him, said Moses. We looked at Mehetabel. She was safe now from the threat of Akil. Her wealth might keep her safe from those others of his kind. No one would accuse her of the murder of the Philistines. With us, who knew what might lie ahead. Moses, too, was thinking of this. He said to her, "Will you still come?" She looked around her, and I knew she thought again of her gods and her possessions and the great terrifying unknown that lay before her if she left them, but perhaps she thought of her kinsmen and her people and her priests bowing their heads before all those others like Akil. Perhaps she thought of all those children dead in useless sacrifice, and of her brother who had wanted to die, and I know she thought of Jotham. She said, "I am coming." We made our way to the city gate. The guard would have stopped and questioned us, but a bar of silver quieted him. Soon we were out of the city, onto the causeway, and finally on the mainland itself. I looked back at the walls of the town, gleaming pale in the moonlight. Tyre will be a great city one day, I thought to myself, greater than Sidon. She will never risk her treasures, and the mighty and the powerful will always be her friends. But I was glad that we had made a different choice. That's the end of chapter 25. So chapter 26 is called Harosheth again, and the first word is the. So next time, which is hopefully Thursday, we're going to read chapter 26, Harosheth again. Chapter 27, which is called the Ark of the Covenant.
Really?
And chapter 28, which is called Home. So, I hope that you are enjoying the story, and we are set to finish it next time. So make sure and stay tuned, and we will see you then. God bless you. Have a great night, and we'll see you then.